The fork hit the plate with a sharp metallic ring that cut through the dinner conversation at table 7. Claire Whitmore felt it before she saw it, the shift in atmosphere, the way laughter takes on an edge right before it becomes cruel. "Hey, sweetheart." Marcus Bellamy leaned back in his chair, diamond cufflinks catching the Edison bulb light above. "You seem like you've got a brain somewhere under that apron. Say one smart thing, just one. I'll give you $100. His colleagues laughed. Not quite loud enough to drown out his words, but loud enough to make sure everyone in Harborside Grill heard them. Claire stood perfectly still, the water pitcher in her hand suddenly feeling heavier than it should. She'd been doing this job for 3 years, slinging overpriced salmon and $40 steaks to Boston's tech elite in their fleece vests and expensive watches. She knew how to smile through it. But something in Marcus Bellamy's face, the casual certainty that she'd play along, that she'd either fumble or flirt or quietly disappear, made a small, dangerous crack in the wall she'd built between who she was and who she pretended to be. "The smartest thing," Claire said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, "would be recognizing that intelligence isn't measured by your ability to humiliate service workers while your colleagues pretend to be impressed." She set the water pitcher down on their table with careful precision. "Your salmon's medium rare like you ordered. The asparagus is locally sourced. Your meeting tomorrow at Paradigm Ventures starts at 9. And you're pitching a Series B for a company that's bleeding cash faster than you can fabricate user metrics. You'll probably get funded anyway because you went to Harvard, and that's how this works." The silence stretched. Marcus Bellamy's face had gone very still. "You dropped your pitch deck last week," Claire continued. "Table 12. I thought about keeping it. Reading confidential VC material seemed more ethical than watching you waste 30 minutes of everyone's time showing off for an audience that isn't half as impressed as you think they are." She picked up the empty appetizer plates, stacking them with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. "Keep your $100, Mr. Bellamy. You'll need it when the SEC starts asking questions about those numbers you're inflating." Claire walked back toward the kitchen, her legs steady, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Behind her she heard the beginning of whispers, the rustle of phones being pulled from pockets. Someone was definitely recording. By morning, this would be everywhere. In the kitchen, her hands finally started shaking. "Holy shit!" Denny, the line cook, stared at her from behind the grill. "Did you just... Don't." Claire pressed her palms flat against the stainless steel prep counter. "I know. She'd just torpedoed this job." Marcus Bellamy was a regular, the kind of regular who brought entire companies here for celebration dinners, who tipped in percentages that made rent possible, whose presence kept Harborside Grill's reservation book full on weeknights. General Manager Troy would have her coat and purse in her hands before the end of her shift, but she couldn't quite regret it. Not yet. Claire was 34 years old. 7 years ago, she'd been Dr. Claire Whitmore, with a doctorate in behavioral economics from MIT and a teaching position that came with an office overlooking the Charles River. 7 years ago, she'd published a paper that changed how tech companies understood consumer decision-making, that got cited in journals and turned into mandatory reading in business schools. 7 years ago, she'd made a choice that cost her everything. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Text from Mia, her daughter. "Mum, are you working late? I need help with my college essay." Claire closed her eyes. 17. Mia was 17 now. Brilliant and careful and determined to get into a good school through scholarships and merit alone, never asking about her father, never questioning why they lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Dorchester instead of the Cambridge townhouse where she'd spent her early childhood. "Table 7 wants to speak to Troy." Jessica, the hostess, appeared in the kitchen doorway. "They seem upset." Of course they did. Troy emerged from his office 8 minutes later, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he'd already made a decision. He was a decent manager, better than most. He'd given Claire this job 3 years ago without asking too many questions about the gap in her resume, had worked around her schedule when Mia was sick, had looked the other way when he caught her reading academic journals during slow afternoons. Claire. Office. Now. She followed him through the narrow hallway lined with liquor deliveries and cleaning supplies. His office was barely bigger than a closet, dominated by a desk covered in invoices and schedule sheets. "I'm sorry," she said before he could start. "I'll work the rest of my shift and save it." Troy ran a hand over his face. He looked tired in the fluorescent light, older than his 43 years. "Marcus Bellamy just informed me that if you're still employed here when he comes back, and he will come back, because men like him can't resist, he'll make sure every tech company in Boston knows Harborside is hostile to their business." "That's true, probably," Troy sighed. "Look, what you said out there, part of me wants to frame it and hang it on the wall. But I've got 18 employees, Claire, people with families. This place barely breaks even as it is." She nodded. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the cold reality of consequences. "I can't fire you tonight," Troy continued. "Labor laws, and also because someone's definitely recording and I don't need that headache. But come Monday, we're going to have a conversation about whether this is still a good fit." Translation: she had 3 days to find another job, in a city where references mattered and word traveled fast. Claire finished her shift in a kind of numb autopilot, smiling at tables, refilling drinks, pretending not to notice the way other servers whispered. At 11:30, she collected her tips, $63, significantly less than usual, and walked out into the October cold. Her car was 12 years old and made concerning sounds when she accelerated, but it started. She drove through empty streets toward Dorchester, past brownstones where lights still glowed in windows, past students stumbling home from Cambridge bars, past the life she used to have. The apartment was dark, except for the lamp Mia always left on. Claire found her daughter asleep at the kitchen table, laptop still open to a half-finished college essay. The title read, "Redefining Success, What My Mother Taught Me About Dignity." Claire's throat tightened. She gently shook Mia's shoulder. "Mom." Mia blinked awake, pushing her glasses up. "What time is it?" "Late. Come on, bed." "Did you have a good shift?" Mia yawned, stretching. Claire thought about the fork hitting the plate, the challenge in Marcus Bellamy's eyes, the moment she chose truth over survival. It was memorable. She helped Mia to bed, then sat alone in the kitchen with her phone. The video was already online. Someone had posted it to Twitter with the caption, "Waitress absolutely destroys entitled VC. 20,000 views in 3 hours. The comments were divided between people calling her a hero and people saying she was bitter and unprofessional. Both were probably right. Claire opened her email, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She could reach out to old colleagues, people who'd known her before, but that meant explanations, meant confronting the reason she'd disappeared, meant risking them discovering what she'd done and why. Or she could keep running, find another restaurant, another anonymous job, another way to stay hidden. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Is this Dr. Whitmore? I saw the video. We should talk." Jennifer Park, Boston Globe. Claire stared at the message. The crack in her wall was widening, and she couldn't tell if what would come through would destroy her or save her. She turned off her phone without responding and sat in the darkness of her kitchen, listening to her daughter breathe in the next room, feeling the weight of choices made and choices coming. Tomorrow, she thought. She'd figure out tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to sit with the fact that she'd finally said something true, even if the cost was everything she'd worked to build. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. The refrigerator hummed. The city kept moving, indifferent to small disasters. Claire allowed herself 5 minutes to cry. Then she wiped her face, opened her laptop, and started updating her resume, knowing it wouldn't be enough, knowing she'd have to try anyway. Claire woke to 17 missed calls and a text from Troy that said simply, "Don't come in today, call me." The video had exploded overnight. 200,000 views, 500,000. The number kept climbing every time she refreshed. Someone had edited it with dramatic music. Someone else had turned it into a TikTok with text overlay. Waitress ends billionaire. Marcus wasn't a billionaire. Server schools entitled Tech Bro. The facts were getting looser with each repost. Mia was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her own phone, eyes wide. "Mom!" She looked up and Claire couldn't read her expression. "You're everywhere." "I know. And the things you said about him, how did you know all that?" This was the question Claire had been dreading. "I used to work in that world. Before you were older, I recognized some things. Not a lie, not quite the truth either. People are saying you should write a book." Mia scrolled through comments. "They're saying you're some kind of, I don't know, warrior for working people. There's already a GoFundMe someone started for you." "What?" Claire grabbed her phone. Sure enough, someone named a Justice Watcher had created a fundraiser. Support the Harborside Hero. It had raised $6,000 in 8 hours. "This is insane," Claire whispered. Her phone rang. "Troy." "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "Stop." His voice was strained. "Listen, corporate called. The video's got 3 million views now. Half the comments are people saying they'll never eat at Harborside again if we fired you. Half saying they'll never eat here if we didn't. Someone spray-painted 'Pay your workers' on the front window last night." Claire's stomach dropped. "Troy, I'm so—" "Let me finish. I also got a call from Marcus Bellamy's lawyer. Apparently, some of what you said about his company was accurate enough to make them nervous. They're threatening a defamation suit, but mostly trying to get the video taken down, which is making it spread faster, obviously." "I should have kept my mouth shut." "Yeah, well," Troy laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You're on unpaid leave while we figure this out. Corporate's lawyers are involved now. Don't talk to anyone, especially not press. I'm supposed to tell you that officially." After he hung up, Claire sat very still. Unpaid leave. She had $800 in savings and rent due in 2 weeks. The GoFundMe wouldn't fix this. She couldn't touch money raised under false pretenses by strangers who thought she was someone she wasn't. She pulled up her banking app, staring at the numbers that never seemed to stretch far enough. Rent was $1.850. Utilities another $200. Mia's school expenses, the monthly payment on the car that barely ran, groceries for 2 people when everything cost twice what it used to. The math was brutal and unforgiving. Claire had gotten good at this particular form of mathematics over the years, the algebra of survival, where every variable represented a choice between bad and worse. Skip the car payment to make rent, risk losing her only reliable transportation to job interviews. Buy generic everything and pray Mia didn't notice. She always noticed, though she never complained. There was another option, one Claire had been avoiding for 7 years. She could call Daniel. Her ex-husband was wealthy now, wealthier than when they'd divorced. His LinkedIn profile showed a senior position at a tech company in San Francisco, speaking engagements, the kind of success that came easily to men who'd never questioned whether their ambition might harm others. He owed child support, technically, but Claire had never pursued it, had signed papers during the divorce that essentially let him walk away clean in exchange for him not fighting her for custody. At the time, newly devastated by the data synth scandal and desperate to keep the one thing that mattered, it had seemed like the only choice. Now, staring at her bank account, she wondered if pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her phone was in her hand before she fully decided. Daniel's number was still saved, though she'd never called it. Her finger hovered over the contact. Mia emerged from her room, headphones around her neck. "Mom, you okay?" Claire locked her phone quickly. "Fine, just thinking about money." It wasn't a question. Mia had inherited Claire's ability to read people, to see the truth beneath polite lies. "It's not your problem to worry about. It's my life too." Mia sat down across from her. "I heard you on the phone with Troy. I know what unpaid leave means." "Baby, don't baby me. I'm 17, not 7. And I'm not stupid." Mia's voice was sharp with frustration. "You won't take the GoFundMe money because you think it's dishonest. You won't call Dad because you're too proud. You won't ask your old colleagues for help because you feel guilty. Meanwhile, we're about to be broke again, and you're sitting here pretending everything's fine." The words hit like a slap. "I'm trying to protect you." From what? Reality? I've been living in reality, Mom. I see how you calculate everything we buy at the grocery store. I know you skip lunch half the time, so there's enough food. I know the car needs repairs we can't afford. Protecting me would be letting me help figure this out, instead of treating me like I'm fragile. Claire felt something crack in her chest. When had Mia become this person, clear-eyed and unafraid to speak hard truths? "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to stop punishing yourself. For data synth, for the divorce, for whatever guilt you're carrying that makes you think you deserve to struggle." Mia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You made a mistake, a big one, but you didn't murder anyone. You didn't steal. You trusted the wrong people, and your research got weaponized. That doesn't mean you have to live in purgatory forever. It's not that simple. It could be, if you let it." Mia stood up, grabbed her backpack. "I'm going to the library. I have college essays to write about resilience and dignity and all the things you taught me, but maybe think about whether you actually believe those things yourself." The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Claire sat in the silence of the apartment, Mia's words echoing. Her daughter was right. Claire had been carrying her guilt like a stone, refusing to put it down because the weight felt like penance. But penance for what? For being human, for failing to predict how her work would be misused? Or was it simpler than that? Was she punishing herself for the unforgivable sin of not knowing everything, of having been naive in a world that rewarded cynicism? The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Claire saw a woman in her 40s with a professional camera, a younger man holding a microphone. The woman smiled directly at the peephole as if she knew Claire was watching. "Dr. Whitmore, Jennifer Park, Boston Globe. Just want to talk for a few minutes about your background. I've been doing some research, MIT, behavioral economics. Quite an impressive resume before you. Transitioned to service work." Claire's blood went cold. She stepped away from the door without answering. "I also pulled some articles from 2017, Jennifer continued through the door, "about the data synth scandal. You were involved in that, weren't you? The algorithm that targeted vulnerable populations?" Mia looked up from her phone. "Mom, what's she talking about?" "Nothing, it's—" Claire's phone rang again. Unknown number. Then another, and another. The data synth scandal. Of course, someone would dig it up. Of course, the past wouldn't stay buried. 7 years ago, Claire had been part of a team developing behavioral prediction algorithms. Beautiful work, theoretically sound, mathematically elegant. They'd partnered with a company called Data Synth to implement it in consumer applications. The algorithm was designed to predict purchasing patterns to help companies understand consumer behavior. The work had consumed her. She'd spent 18 months refining the model, testing it against datasets, marveling at how accurately it could predict human decision-making based on seemingly unrelated variables. It was like discovering a new language, one that translated the messy complexity of human psychology into clean, beautiful mathematics. She remembered the day they'd first achieved 93% accuracy in predicting consumer choices. She'd stayed at the lab until 3 in the morning, running validation tests, double-checking the results. When the numbers held, she'd called Daniel, breathless with excitement. "We did it," she'd said. "We actually did it. We can predict purchasing behavior with better accuracy than people can predict their own choices." Daniel had been enthusiastic, proud even. "This is going to change everything, Claire. Do you know what this means for targeted advertising, for product development?" She'd heard the dollar signs in his voice, but had dismissed it as pragmatism. Research needed funding, companies needed applications. That was how the system worked. What Claire hadn't known, what she'd somehow failed to see until it was too late, was how Data Synth was actually using it. They'd weaponized her research to target people in financial distress, people with gambling problems, people whose behavioral patterns indicated vulnerability. They'd sold that targeting to predatory lenders, to payday loan companies, to anyone willing to pay. The algorithm could identify someone spiraling into depression before they fully recognized it themselves. It could predict when someone would be most vulnerable to impulse purchases, when their decision-making would be most compromised by stress or grief or desperation. And DataSynth had monetized every single insight. When the first lawsuit was filed, Claire had been genuinely confused. "We're helping people," she'd told Daniel over dinner at the Cambridge restaurant where they used to celebrate milestones. "We're providing personalized services." He'd looked at her with something between pity and disbelief. "Claire, you really don't know what they're doing with your algorithm." "What do you mean?" And then he'd told her. Not everything. He'd been careful even then. Protecting himself, but enough. Enough for Claire to understand that her beautiful, elegant mathematics had become a weapon aimed at the most vulnerable people in society. She'd gone to the lab that night and read through every implementation report she could access. The data was horrifying. A 38-year-old woman in Ohio, recently divorced, flagged as high vulnerability for emotional spending, targeted with ads for luxury goods she couldn't afford, offers for credit cards with predatory interest rates. She'd ended up $20,000 in debt. A veteran in Arizona dealing with PTSD, identified as susceptible to repetitive behavior patterns, targeted with gambling ads, casino promotions, sports betting apps. He'd lost his savings in 3 months. A single mother in Michigan, working 2 jobs, marked as desperate for quick solutions. Bombarded with payday loan offers, get-rich-quick schemes, anything that promised immediate relief from financial stress. She'd fallen into a debt cycle that took 2 years to escape. Hundreds of stories like these, thousands maybe, all powered by Claire's algorithm. Her research, her beautiful mathematics. When it came out, when the lawsuits started, Claire had been cleared legally. She hadn't known, she hadn't profited beyond her salary, she wasn't criminally liable. But she'd built the weapon, and people had been hurt. The academic community had been divided. Some supported her, some said she should have been more careful, more aware of potential misuse. Her teaching position became temporarily suspended pending review. The suspension became permanent. The emails stopped coming. The invitations dried up. And then there was Daniel. Her husband, ex-husband now, had been a senior VP at DataSynth. He'd known exactly what they were doing. He'd known and hadn't told her. Had kept her brilliant and naive and useful, while the company made millions weaponizing her research. When she'd found out, when she'd confronted him, he'd looked at her with genuine confusion. "You had to know, Claire. You're too smart not to have known." But she hadn't, and that ignorance had cost her everything. Her career, her marriage, her sense of who she was. The divorce had been quick and brutal. Daniel had kept most of their assets through lawyers Claire couldn't afford to fight. She'd kept Mia and the crushing weight of guilt that made it hard to breathe some mornings. So she'd run. Changed her name back to Whitmore, moved to a different neighborhood, taken a job where nobody knew Dr. Claire Whitmore and nobody cared about behavioral economics. She'd rebuilt something small and safe and anonymous, until last night when she'd let her pride crack that safety open. "Mom," Mia's voice was small. "What is she talking about? What scandal?" Claire sat down at the table. Her daughter deserved the truth, had always deserved it. "I need to tell you something," Claire began, "about why we live the way we do, about your father, about who I used to be." She told her. Not everything, there were parts Mia didn't need to carry, but enough. The research, the algorithm, the people who'd been hurt, Daniel's betrayal. The choice Claire had made to disappear rather than fight to rehabilitate a reputation built on work that had caused harm. Mia listened without interrupting, her face unreadable behind her glasses. "So you just gave up," Mia said finally. "You had this whole career and you just walked away." "I couldn't stay. Every time I walked into a lecture hall, I'd wonder if someone in the audience had been targeted by my algorithm. Every time I published, people would ask if I'd learned anything, if I'd take responsibility. But you didn't know what they were doing. I should have. That's the thing, Mia. I was so focused on the elegance of the math, the beauty of the model, that I never stopped to ask what it would mean in the real world. I never asked the most important question. Just because we can, should we?" Mia was quiet for a long time. Outside, Claire could hear the reporters still talking, their voices muffled through the door. "Is that why Dad never calls? Your father and we saw that situation very differently. He thought I was naive. I thought he was morally bankrupt. Turns out we were both right." "The college essay I wrote," Mia said slowly, "about dignity and success. I wrote about how you always told me that real success means being able to look at yourself in the mirror, but you've been hiding for 7 years. The words hit harder than Claire expected. "I know. So what now? You're just going to keep hiding? Let them control the story?" "I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know." Mia stood up, walked to the window, careful not to be seen by the reporters outside. "There's like 50 comments on that video from people saying your response inspired them to speak up about stuff at their jobs, to stop accepting being treated like they don't matter, and you're sitting here wanting to disappear again. It's not that simple, isn't it?" Mia turned to face her. "You spent 7 years punishing yourself for making a mistake. Maybe it's time to stop." Claire's phone rang again. This time she recognized the number, Professor Sarah Chen, her former colleague at MIT. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Claire." Sarah's voice was warm, familiar. "I saw the video, and then I saw the vultures digging up data synth. I wanted to call before you heard from anyone else. Sarah, listen to me. What happened with data synth was horrible, but you're not the villain in that story. You were used, and instead of fighting it, instead of letting people who actually knew you defend you, you vanished. Do you know how many times I wanted to call you? How many of us wanted to help? I didn't deserve help. Bullshit. You made a mistake. A significant one, yes, but a mistake. And you've been serving a sentence for it that nobody imposed but you." Meanwhile, Daniel's working at another tech company doing exactly what he did before, and the actual executives who profited from data synth barely got slapped with fines. Claire felt something crack open in her chest. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't face any of you." "Well, you're facing the whole world now, whether you meant to or not. So here's what I'm thinking. There's a symposium next month on ethical AI and tech responsibility. You should speak." "What? No, Sarah, I can't." "You can, and you should, because right now you have a platform whether you wanted it or not. You can use it to keep hiding, or you can use it to say something that matters. Your choice." After Sarah hung up, Claire sat with her phone in her hands, thinking about choices and consequences and the difference between hiding and healing. Mia was watching her. What did she say? She wants me to speak about ethics in tech, about what happened. Are you going to? Claire looked at her daughter, 17 years old, brilliant, brave in ways Claire had forgotten how to be. I don't know if I can, but you know you should, Mia said quietly. Don't you? Outside, the reporters were multiplying. Claire's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The video had passed 5 million views. And somewhere in Boston, Marcus Bellamy was probably regretting ever asking her to say one smart thing. Claire had spent 7 years in silence. Maybe Mia was right, maybe it was time to speak. But first, she had to figure out what she wanted to say, and whether she was brave enough to say it. The symposium invitation sat on Claire's kitchen table for 3 days, untouched. In that time, the world kept moving in ways she couldn't control. The GoFundMe hit $40,000. Someone started a petition demanding Harborside reinstate her with a raise. Marcus Bellamy's company released a statement calling the video taken out of context and threatening legal action. That statement was immediately mocked into memes, but there were other developments, darker ones that the viral attention had obscured. Claire started receiving messages, dozens of them, from people claiming to have been affected by the data synth algorithm. Some were grateful for her speaking out. Others were angry, demanding to know how she could have been so blind, so irresponsible. One message in particular haunted her. It came from a woman named Patricia Gonzalez. Dr. Whitmore, my name is Patricia. In 2016, your algorithm identified me as a high-risk emotional spender after my husband died. I was targeted with ads for memorial services I couldn't afford, credit card offers, luxury items that promised to fill the emptiness. I went from stable to $47,000 in debt in 8 months. I lost my house. I thought about suicide. I don't know if you care, but I want you to know that your beautiful research destroyed my life. Not data synth. You built the tool. You made it possible. I survived. I rebuilt. But I will never forgive you for being so smart about math and so stupid about people. Claire read the message 20 times, printed it out, pinned it to the wall above her desk where she'd see it every day. Mia found her there at 2 in the morning, staring at the printed message. Mom, you need to sleep. I need to remember. Claire didn't turn around. Every time I think about going back to that world, to academia or tech ethics or any of it, I need to remember what I did. What you did was make a mistake. What Data Synth did was criminal. I enabled it. Claire finally looked at her daughter. That woman, Patricia, she's right. I was so focused on being smart that I never asked if what I was building could hurt people. I never asked, what if this falls into the wrong hands? I just assumed everyone would use it responsibly. You were naive. That's not the same as malicious. Tell that to the people who lost everything. Claire's voice cracked. Tell that to the veteran who lost his savings, the single mother trapped in debt. They don't care about my intentions. Why should they? Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled up a chair and sat next to Claire. You want to know what I think? I think you're using guilt as an excuse not to try. Because if you stay guilty, if you keep punishing yourself, you never have to risk failing again. You never have to put yourself out there and maybe make another mistake. That's not, it is. You're scared, Mom, and I get it. But you know what's more scared? Staying hidden, letting what you learned go to waste, because it's safer than trying to do better. Claire looked at her daughter, 17 years old, seeing through her with uncomfortable clarity. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. She just forgot to apply her own lessons. Troy called on day 4. Corporate wants to offer you your job back. Full pay, back pay for the suspension, and a public statement of support. Why? Claire asked, though she already knew. Because someone leaked that Marcus Bellamy's been sexually harassing servers for months, and we never did anything about it. Now we're covering our ass. Look, I know it's messy, but you need the job, right? She did. Desperately. The unpaid leave had drained her savings. She'd already started looking at cheaper apartments in rougher neighborhoods, had run the numbers on whether Mia could defer college for a year. But taking the job back meant becoming part of their damage control. It meant being used again, differently this time, but still used. "I'll think about it," Claire said. "Don't think too long. Offer's only good while you're useful to them." After he hung up, Mia emerged from her room. She'd been quieter since learning about data synth, spending more time in libraries and less time at home. Claire couldn't tell if she was processing or avoiding. "You should take it," Mia said. "The job. I thought you wanted me to stop hiding. I want you to not be broke." Mia grabbed her backpack. "I'm going to study at Jasmine's." "Don't wait up." The door closed with more force than necessary. Claire sat alone in the apartment, feeling the walls close in. The choice felt impossible. Take the job and compromise her integrity, or refuse it and compromise her ability to take care of Mia. Different versions of failure, both bitter. She opened her laptop and for the first time in 7 years searched her own name. The results were overwhelming. Old articles about her research at MIT, glowing profiles about her innovative work in behavioral economics. Then the shift, the data synth scandal, the lawsuits, the congressional hearings. Headlines like, "MIT professor's algorithm exploits vulnerable consumers," and "The cost of innovation, how academic research enables predatory business." Claire read every article, forced herself to read the comment sections, the rage and pain from people who'd been affected. Let herself feel the weight of what her ignorance had enabled. Then she found something unexpected. A blog post from 2019 by someone named Marcus Jennings. "I was targeted by the data synth algorithm," he wrote. "It knew I was depressed before I did. It knew I was vulnerable to impulse purchases. It knew how to manipulate me into decisions that made my life worse. But here's what I want Dr. Whitmore to know. I don't blame her. I blame the system that prioritizes profit over people, that takes beautiful research and weaponizes it. I blame the executives who knew what they were doing. Dr. Whitmore's silence doesn't help anyone. We need people like her to speak up about how this happens, how good intentions get corrupted. We need her to stop hiding and start teaching others to ask the questions she didn't ask." Claire read it 3 times, feeling something shift inside her. Marcus Jennings. She looked him up. He was speaking at the same symposium Sarah had invited her to. The weight of the decision pressed down on her. She could take the harborside job, stay safe, keep hiding. Or she could accept Sarah's invitation, speak at the symposium, risk everything again. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Dr. Whitmore, this is Amanda Foster. I'm a producer at NPR. I'd like to talk to you about doing an interview for our Ethics in Tech series." I don't think that's a good idea." "I understand you're hesitant, but people are having this conversation with or without you. Don't you want your perspective included? Don't you want to tell your side?" "My side doesn't matter. People were hurt. Your side absolutely matters. Because right now, the narrative is that you're either a hero or a villain. But the reality is more complicated, isn't it? And complexity is what we need more of in these conversations." After Amanda hung up, Claire pulled out the symposium invitation. Read it again. The title was Technology, Ethics and Accountability. Whose responsibility is innovation? She thought about Marcus Bellamy, asking her to say one smart thing. She'd said something true instead, and truth, she was learning, was far more dangerous and necessary than smart. Claire sent an email before she could overthink it. "Sarah, I'll speak at the symposium, but I need to say more than what happened with data synth. I need to talk about what comes after failure, after trying to rebuild." Is there space for that? Sarah's response came in minutes. There's space for whatever truth you need to tell. The NPR interview happened 2 days later, recorded in a studio in downtown Boston. Amanda Foster was in her 50s, with kind eyes and questions that cut through pretense. "Let's start with last week," Amanda said. "Why did you respond the way you did to Marcus Bellamy?" "Because I was tired," Claire said honestly. "Tired of being invisible. Tired of watching people treat service workers like we're somehow less intelligent or less worthy of respect because we bring them food instead of pitch them startups." "But you're not just a service worker. You have a doctorate from MIT. That's exactly the problem with that question, as if serving food is something to escape rather than work that has dignity in itself. I'm a person who waitresses. I'm also a person who used to do academic research. Both things are true. Neither makes me worth more or less." Amanda leaned forward. "Let's talk about data synth. You've been silent for 7 years. Why speak now?" "Because silence hasn't helped anyone. I thought disappearing was taking responsibility, but really I was just avoiding accountability. There's a difference." "Explain that." Claire took a breath. "Responsibility is accepting that my work was used to harm people. Accountability is staying engaged with the question of how to prevent it from happening again. I chose responsibility and avoided accountability. That was cowardice. That's harsh. It's true, and I'm done hiding from true things, even when they're uncomfortable." The interview aired 3 days before the symposium. Response was mixed. Some people praised her honesty. Others said she was trying to rehabilitate her image. A few pointed out that talking about it on NPR wasn't exactly accountability either. They weren't wrong. The night before the symposium, Mia came home late with her friend Jasmine. They found Claire at the kitchen table, surrounded by note cards and crossed-out drafts. "Still working on your speech?" Mia asked. "I keep trying to sound smart, and it comes out hollow." Jasmine, who'd never been shy, said, "Maybe stop trying to sound smart and just say what you mean." After the girls went to Mia's room, Claire stared at her notes, crossed them all out, started over. The symposium was held at a hotel in Cambridge, the same neighborhood where she'd once taught. Walking through those streets felt like moving through a ghost of her former life. There was the coffee shop where she'd graded papers, the bookstore where she'd spent entire afternoons, the river where she'd walked when ideas needed space to breathe. The conference room held about 200 people. Sarah met her at the entrance, pulled her into a hug. "You look terrified," Sarah said. "I am." "Good. Means it matters." Marcus Jennings was there, the blogger who'd written about being targeted by her algorithm. He was younger than Claire expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What you said on NPR about the difference between responsibility and accountability, that meant something." "I'm sorry," Claire said, "for what my work did to you. I know. But I'd rather you use that sorry to help make sure it doesn't keep happening to other people." The panel started at 2. Claire was scheduled last, after experts in AI ethics and tech policy had discussed regulation and corporate responsibility. She listened to them talk about frameworks and oversight, important work that felt somehow distant from the human cost she couldn't forget. When her turn came, Claire stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. She saw tech workers and academics, activists and journalists. She saw Mia in the back row, sitting with Sarah. She threw away her prepared remarks. 7 years ago, Claire began, I helped build an algorithm that was used to harm vulnerable people. I didn't know that's what would happen. I was naive and arrogant and so focused on the theoretical elegance of the work that I never stopped to ask the most important question. Who benefits and who pays the cost when this gets deployed in the real world? She paused. When it came out, when I learned what had been done with my research, I was devastated. But I was also furious at the company, at my husband who knew and didn't tell me, at a system that rewarded people for exploiting that kind of vulnerability. And I was furious at myself for being so blind. I lost my career, lost my marriage, and I decided that I deserved that loss, that I should punish myself by disappearing. So I became a waitress, not because there's anything wrong with that work, but because I was hiding in it, using it as penance. But here's what I learned serving overpriced salmon to tech executives. Hiding doesn't undo harm. Silence doesn't protect anyone. What happened with data synth keeps happening because the incentives haven't changed, because people like me who understand the research stay quiet after we get burned. Claire gripped the podium. Last week, a man challenged me to say one smart thing, and what I said was true, but it wasn't smart. It was angry. Angry at the arrogance, at the assumption that intelligence is measured by wealth or status, angry at myself for having been complicit in a system that treats people like data points. So, here's what I want to say now. We need to stop treating accountability like it's a one-time event. It's not a press release or an apology or even a speech. It's a continuous practice of staying engaged with the consequences of our work, of asking hard questions before we build things, not after, of being willing to say no when the answer to "who does this serve?" is whoever can pay the most. I don't have all the answers. I don't even have most of them, but I'm done being silent. I'm done hiding. And I'm asking anyone who's ever built something that got misused, don't disappear. Stay, fight, help us figure out how to do better. The applause was scattered at first, then growing. Claire's hands were shaking. She sat down, feeling like she might throw up. Afterward, people wanted to talk to her. Some were supportive, some had questions. One man, a tech CEO, told her she was being self-righteous and didn't understand how business worked. "You're probably right," Claire said, "but I understand how harm works, and I'd rather be self-righteous than complicit." Mia found her in the lobby, eyes shining. "Mom, that was terrifying?" "True." Mia hugged her fiercely. "That was true." Driving home, Claire felt hollowed out and somehow lighter. She'd spoken. She'd told the truth. She had no idea what came next, but for the first time in 7 years, the silence wasn't crushing her. Her phone buzzed. Email from Troy. Corporate saw the symposium. "They're withdrawing the job offer. Said you're too controversial now." "I'm sorry." Claire read it twice, then put the phone away. She'd known this was possible, had known that truth often came with a cost. But as she looked at Mia in the passenger seat, working on college applications with the kind of fierce determination that made Claire's heart ache with pride, she thought maybe some costs were worth paying. The money ran out 6 weeks after the symposium. Claire had rationed it carefully. The savings, the back pay from Harborside they'd had to give her per her contract, despite withdrawing the job offer, even a small portion of the GoFundMe that she'd finally reluctantly accepted after the organizer convinced her it was genuine support, not charity. But rent in Boston was unforgiving, and the gap between wages and survival had always been thinner than she wanted to admit. She'd applied to 37 positions, waitressing jobs mostly, a few administrative positions at non-profits, one absolutely humiliating application to work retail at a tech company store because the irony felt almost poetic. Most didn't respond. The ones that did said things like overqualified or not the right fit, or in one memorable case, "We don't want the publicity." The video had 15 million views now. She'd become a symbol for service workers' dignity, for speaking truth to power, for the perils of tech ethics, depending on who was talking. None of it helped pay rent. "We could move," Mia said one morning, over breakfast that consisted of toast and the last of the peanut butter. "Somewhere cheaper, a different city." "Your senior year." "Absolutely not." "Mom." Mia's voice was gentle in a way that made Claire want to cry. "We can't afford to stay here. And I can finish high school anywhere. You're applying to schools in Boston, MIT, Harvard, BU. Your whole support network is here. My support network is you. Everything else is just geography. Claire looked at her daughter. When had she become so pragmatic, so willing to sacrifice, and felt the weight of every choice she'd made pressing down on her chest? "Let me figure it out," Claire said. "Give me 2 more weeks." She spent those weeks doing something she hadn't done in 7 years. She reached out. The first email was the hardest. Professor James Woolcott, who'd supervised her doctoral work, who'd written her recommendation letters, who'd stopped returning her calls after data synth. "James, I know I disappeared. I know I probably disappointed you, but I'm trying to figure out how to move forward, and I don't know how to do it alone. If you have 15 minutes, I'd like to talk." He responded in 2 hours. "My office, Thursday at 3. MIT's campus felt like a dream Claire was watching herself move through. Students younger than Mia hurried between classes. The building still smelled like old paper and ambition. James's office was exactly as she remembered, chaotic with books, walls covered in equations and cartoons, a half-eaten sandwich on the desk. "You look tired," James said by way of greeting. "I am tired." "Good, means you're still fighting." He gestured to a chair buried under academic journals. "Sit, talk." So she did. She told him about the restaurant, about Marcus Bellamy, about the video and the symposium, and the strange liminal space she now occupied. Too visible to disappear, too controversial to ignore, too broke to survive much longer. James listened without interrupting, a skill Claire had forgotten he possessed. "What do you want?" he asked when she finished. "I don't know. To stop feeling like I'm drowning, to be able to afford to keep Mia in Boston for her senior year, to do something useful with whatever understanding I have about tech ethics, even if I can never work in the field again." "Who says you can't work in the field?" "Everyone. The fact that no one will hire me. The fact that I'm toxic." "You're not toxic. You're complicated. There's a difference." James leaned back in his chair. "Here's what I see. You have direct experience with how good research gets weaponized. You understand both the technical and human dimensions. You can communicate complex ideas clearly. That symposium speech has been shared in every ethics class I teach. These are valuable skills, not valuable enough to pay rent. Maybe you're looking in the wrong places." He pulled out a folder, handed it to her. "There's a new initiative, consortium of universities and non-profits working on ethical tech development. They need people who can bridge academic research and real-world implementation. People who understand where things go wrong." Claire opened the folder. The position was called Ethics Implementation Specialist. The description included things like work with researchers to assess potential harms before deployment and develop frameworks for accountability in tech development. "James, I can't. After data synth, I can't be responsible for—" "You won't be alone. That's the point. It's collaborative oversight, multiple perspectives, checks and balances built into the process." He paused. "And it pays enough to live on, not luxuriously, but enough." "Why would they want me?" "Because you failed. Because you lived through the consequences. Because you're honest about it." James smiled slightly. "Also because I'm on the advisory board, and I told them you'd be perfect." Claire felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of it. "I need to think about it." "Don't think too long. Interviews next week." She left campus in a daze, walked along the Charles River where she used to walk when she was younger and more certain of everything. Her phone rang. "Mia." "Mom, are you sitting down?" "I'm walking. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Something's weird. I got an email from MIT Financial Aid Office. They're offering me a full scholarship, not just tuition, everything. Room, board, books, stipend. They said it's a new program for students whose parents work in tech ethics." Claire stopped walking. "What?" "It's not just MIT. I got similar emails from 3 other schools I applied to. "Mom, what's happening?" "I don't. I need to make a call." Sarah answered on the first ring. "Before you yell at me, let me explain." "What did you do?" "A bunch of us, me, James, some others from MIT and Harvard and BU, we got together after your symposium. We were talking about how brilliant researchers leave the field because we don't support them when things get complicated. So we created a scholarship program for dependents of people working in tech ethics. It's completely legitimate, went through all the proper channels." "Sarah, Mia earned it, Claire. She's brilliant. This isn't charity. It's investment in the next generation." Claire sat down on a bench overlooking the river, felt tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally break through. "Why?" she managed. "Because we failed you. When data synth happened, we should have fought for you, should have helped you navigate it instead of letting you disappear. This doesn't fix that, but maybe it helps make sure the people who come after you don't have to choose between ethics and survival." The interview happened the following Tuesday in a nondescript office building near Kendall Square. The panel consisted of 6 people: academics, non-profit directors, one reformed tech executive who'd become an ethics advocate after his company's algorithm showed bias in hiring. They asked about data synth, not in an accusatory way, but genuinely trying to understand where the breakdown happened, what warning signs she'd missed, how oversight might have prevented it. "I was arrogant," Claire said. "I believed that because my intentions were good, the outcomes would be too. I didn't ask hard enough questions about implementation. I didn't push back when things felt too fast or too secretive. And I didn't understand that in business, especially tech business, innovative often means exploitative in new ways we haven't regulated yet." "How would you approach research differently now?" one panelist asked. "I'd start with the question of harm, not what can this do, but what could this do to the most vulnerable people affected by it. I'd insist on transparency. I'd build in review processes with people who aren't invested in the success of the project. And I'd be willing to walk away if the answers to those questions weren't acceptable, even if walking away meant career consequences." Claire thought about the last 7 years. The restaurant shifts, the invisibility, Mia growing up in a 1-bedroom apartment instead of the life Claire had imagined giving her. "Especially then," she said, "because the career consequences of walking away are nothing compared to the human consequences of not walking away." They offered her the position the next day, 32 hours a week to start, with benefits and the possibility of expansion. Enough to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, enough to let Mia finish high school without upheaval, enough to breathe. Claire said yes before she could overthink it. She started 3 weeks later. The work was harder than she'd expected, not intellectually, but emotionally. Every project she reviewed reminded her of data synth, of all the ways good intentions could be corrupted, but she wasn't alone in it. The team was small but committed, people who'd also seen the damage unchecked innovation could do. Her first major project was reviewing a mental health prediction algorithm. The researchers were earnest, well-meaning, excited about the potential to identify people at risk of depression before they reached crisis. Claire read the proposal and saw data synth all over again. "What happens to the data?" she asked in the review meeting. "Who has access? How do you prevent it from being used by insurance companies to deny coverage or employers to avoid hiring people flagged as risks?" The lead researcher, a psychology PhD student Claire's age, looked defensive. "We have safeguards, privacy protections." Data synth had safeguards too. They weren't enough. You need to design this assuming bad actors will try to access this data because they will. And you need to ask yourselves, even if we could identify depression risk perfectly, should we? What are the social implications of labeling people preemptively? The conversation was tense. But a week later, the research team came back with revised protocols, stronger protections, and a more nuanced understanding of the ethical complexities. "You made us think harder," the PhD student told Claire afterward. "That's annoying, but also necessary." It felt like the first useful thing Claire had done in years. Mia graduated high school in June, with honors and scholarship offers from 5 schools. She chose MIT, of course she chose MIT, and hugged Claire so hard when she decided that Claire felt something fundamental shift in her chest. "You're going to be amazing," Claire whispered. "I learned from the best," Mia whispered back. "Someone who made mistakes and then spent 7 years figuring out how to do better." The summer before Mia left for college passed in a strange, bittersweet rhythm. Claire worked at the consortium reviewing algorithms and challenging researchers to ask harder questions. Mia worked at the bookstore and spent her free time preparing for MIT, oscillating between excitement and terror in a way that made Claire's heart ache with recognition. They had dinner together every night, a ritual they'd maintained even during the hardest years. Sometimes they talked about everything: Claire's work, Mia's fears about college, the complicated legacy of the data synth scandal that would probably follow them both forever. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, just existing in each other's presence. One evening in late July, Mia asked the question Claire had been dreading. "Do you ever regret it? The video, I mean, speaking up to Marcus Bellamy, everything that came after." Claire thought about it carefully. "I regret that it took me so long, that I needed to be pushed that far before I stopped hiding. But the actual moment, no. For the first time in 7 years, I told the truth. That doesn't mean everything that followed was good, but the truth itself, I don't regret that. Even though it made everything harder. Especially because it made everything harder. The easy path was staying invisible. But invisible meant silent, and silence doesn't protect anyone." Mia nodded slowly. "I'm going to miss you. Miss these conversations. MIT is 20 minutes away. You're not moving to California. I know, but it won't be the same. It'll be my world, not ours together." Claire reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "That's how it should be. You're supposed to build your own world. I'm just grateful I get to watch you do it. Will you be okay on your own?" The question surprised Claire with its directness. "Yes, I think so. Maybe for the first time in a long time." 2 weeks before move-in day, Claire received an unexpected email. Patricia Gonzalez, the woman who'd sent the angry message months ago, had written again. "Dr. Whitmore, I saw your symposium talk online. I also read about your work with the Ethics Consortium. I don't know if this matters to you, but I wanted to say I'm still angry. What happened to me still affects my life every day. But I watched you admit you were wrong, watched you try to do better, and I realized that's more than most people who hurt me have ever done. You can't fix what happened, but maybe you can help prevent it from happening to someone else. That's not forgiveness. I'm not sure I can give you that, but it's acknowledgement. You're trying. That's something." Claire read the message 3 times, then carefully saved it in a folder she labeled accountability. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't absolution, but it was a reminder that the work mattered, even when it couldn't undo the harm. The video of Claire's confrontation with Marcus Bellamy still circulated occasionally, usually when someone wanted to make a point about workers' rights or tech entitlement. It had 30 million views now. Sometimes Claire watched it, trying to remember who she'd been in that moment, so angry, so tired, so done with being invisible. She didn't regret it. Not the confrontation, not the consequences, not even the chaos that followed. It had cracked her life open in ways that hurt, but also let light in. Marcus Bellamy's company had folded 4 months after the video, after the SEC did investigate and found the inflated metrics Claire had mentioned. He'd started another venture. Men like him always did. One afternoon, Claire was leaving the consortium office when she saw someone familiar walking toward the building. Marcus Jennings, the blogger who'd been targeted by her algorithm, who'd spoken at the symposium. Dr. Whitmore. He smiled. "I was hoping I'd run into you. I'm consulting on a project here, reviewing an education algorithm." "That's wonderful. How's the blog?" "Growing. I've been writing about my experience working with ethical review processes, about how different it feels to have people actually ask, 'Should we?' before they build things." He paused. "You're part of why that's happening. Why we're having these conversations. I was part of the problem first, and now you're part of the solution. Both things can be true." After he left, Claire stood on the sidewalk watching students hurry past, thinking about truth and complexity and the long road between causing harm and making amends. She'd never fully fix what data synth had broken. The people who'd been hurt by her algorithm, whose lives had been made harder by her ignorance. No amount of ethical review work would undo that. She couldn't earn redemption, like it was a degree or a promotion, but she could show up, could ask hard questions, could use what she'd learned to try to prevent the next version of herself from making the same mistakes. That evening, Claire picked up Mia from her summer job at a bookstore. They grabbed takeout, not fancy, but better than the peanut butter toast days, and ate in their apartment with the windows open to catch the summer breeze. "Your dad called," Mia said casually. "First time in 3 years." Claire's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "What did he want?" "Congratulations on MIT, and to tell me he saw some article about your work. He said he was sorry for how things ended." "What did you say?" "I said thank you for the congratulations, and then I had to go." Mia pushed rice around her plate. "Do you think people actually change, or do they just get better at pretending?" "I don't know. Maybe it's different for everyone. Maybe change is just doing slightly better today than you did yesterday, consistently for years. Like you. Like trying to." Claire reached across the small table, squeezed Mia's hand. "I'm proud of you, not just for MIT, but for everything. For being patient with me while I figured out how to stop hiding. For calling me out when I needed it." "Someone had to." Mia squeezed back. "You would have kept serving salmon forever if I hadn't pushed." "Probably. I'm good at punishing myself. Less good at forgiving myself." "Well, keep working on that. It's important." Later, after Mia went to bed, Claire sat at her laptop and drafted an email to the NPR producer who'd interviewed her months ago. "Amanda, you asked if I'd be willing to participate in a follow-up series on accountability. I'm ready now, if the offer still stands. I have things I need to say about what comes after failure, about how we build systems that support people doing the hard work of ethics instead of abandoning them when things get complicated." She hit send before she could second-guess it. Outside her window, Boston hummed with its particular summer energy. Students and tourists and people heading home from late shifts, everyone moving through their own complicated lives. Claire thought about the question Marcus Bellamy had asked, the challenge that had changed everything. Say one smart thing. She'd said something true instead. And truth, she'd learned, was messy and costly and necessary. It didn't solve everything. Didn't erase the harm she'd contributed to, or make rent magically affordable, or guarantee that her work now would matter in the ways she hoped. But it let her look at herself in the mirror. Let her show Mia what it meant to fail and keep trying anyway. Let her wake up in the morning and know that whatever she built today, she was asking the hard questions first. That wasn't redemption. But maybe it was enough. Claire closed her laptop and went to stand at the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, algorithms were being built, decisions were being made, systems were being designed that would shape people's lives in ways the designers might never understand. And somewhere, she hoped, people like her were asking, just because we can, should we? It wasn't much, but it was something. And after 7 years of silence, something felt like the beginning of enough.